Okay, I can admit when I'm wrong. I have been asking for an episode like this for years, and it's finally here, and I might be eating my own words.
Dun, dun, dun.
There's so much that's happening in this episode that I want to unpack, and it's really an episode that I have honestly been asking for. A mob-centered Batman versus a mob, and this one delivers on that almost too much, almost to a fault. And I got done with the episode and thought, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. And maybe this is why we don't do episodes like this. Maybe I don't know what I was asking for.
I think you do.
This whole episode has very much a feel of an old film noir, cops and robbers sort of story. Now, I want to say, first and foremost, I'm a huge fan of film noir. I've got them box sets on DVDs and collections, and I love watching them, any and all types, the famous popular ones and the not so popular ones from the late 30s through the early 50s. I've got books on the subject. I just really love film noir. And honestly, I think some of that came from Batman the Animated Series because it had this influence of film noir, and I wanted to learn more about it and sort of dug into that style. Now, one of the things about film noir that I think people forget about is that it was made out of a necessity for lack of money.
There are times when things are black and white.
It was the time period's version of independent movies where it was like making movies for the cheap. Literally the iconic lighting style that's designed for film noir, which I'm borrowing a little bit from in my lighting setup here, those sharp set shadows and those single light sources was a budget constraint. They would light entire city streets with 3 or 4 lamps and go and light a room with a single motivated light of a lamp on the corner, which made these sharp shadows. They weren't softened by silks or anything like that. It was just hard shadows. And it became an iconic element of that look. So it was done on the cheap.
You know it's not that simple.
The other thing that are a big focus of those is it's very heavy dialogue driven. Because they'd shoot a scene in the police headquarters and it'd just be 2 cops talking for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Because that was an easy thing to shoot. A couple of camera setups, 1 or 2 lights, and just talking. No action, no bullets, no explosions, no cars, just in a room talking. That's easy. Cheaper, I shouldn't say easier, but it's cheaper to shoot.
Mitigating circumstances.
This episode reminds me of those old cops and robbers sort of stories. This is very much focused on the police.
We're the damn police.
It's very much focused on the mob, this hit out on Gordon, and it's very dialogue driven. I like the dialogue. I think the dialogue is very well written in this, but I sort of got used to the tempo of the show, and this episode came along and went, oh wow, we're just starting it off with this conversation between Barbara and her dad, Jim Gordon, talking about the difference of the legal system and the relationship between her being a lawyer and getting people off and him being a police commissioner and arresting people, and people are bad and I still see the good in people. Like, it was just a very dialogue-driven scene. And then we see a guy get shot because he was trying to shoot Gordon. By the way, there will be spoilers in this episode as I talk about it. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, go watch it, come back and see that, because I'm going to spoil something along the way, and I don't want to be held responsible for that.
I guess not.
Okay, you back? All right. So yeah, we see a guy try to shoot Gordon.
Hey, Gordon!
Oh, which one? So we see this guy get shot right at the beginning, and that sort of, again, sets the tone of like, this is a different sort of show, different sort of episode, and we're kind of off and running. You know, just the setup of this small, trusted group of people, police and lawyers that are on the run because there's a hit out, know who you're going to trust. In my psyche, it feels like that's a plot of an old film noir. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it has probably been done a dozen of times. Even we see that where they're like, somebody's held up in a safe house and people are trying to get in, and who can you try to let them, you know. Again, these are all very similar tropes to the old style of filmmaking and storytelling, and I like that. On the surface, even as I'm saying, I'm like, that's really cool that they really dig into that. But again, coming from the last episode where we dealt with ghosts and supernatural to this, feels like just a sharp U-turn. When I watched it the second time, I liked it better. But on first glance, again, we're all over the map with these episodes. And it's a little tricky to get my head around, like, what is this show gonna be? What is the footprint here?
What the hell is going on?
And then we're partway through and we sort of introduce I don't even know if you could call it this, but the villain of the week or the villain of the episode, Onomatopoeia, which is such a weird villain. I will admit I had to look it up because I was not familiar with this villain. He came out in the early 2000s, so there's a lot of weird stuff going on at that time in comic books. He was created by Kevin Smith, and his whole gimmick was he speaks in sound effects and onomatopoeias.
Swish, crack, whoosh.
Which is sort of a gimmick for a comic book because that's how they put the sound effects on the page. He actually just says those. It's almost like a breaking the fourth wall of comic books sort of thing. It seems like it was just done as a joke and a one-off, and that's such a deep cut and such a weird villain to bring into this. And me, who's a big superhero fan, a big Batman fan, I wasn't familiar with this villain. Now, to be fair, he was introduced in Green Arrow, and I don't know if it plays real well on the screen. I almost feel like they should have had the speech bubbles come out and you see the sound effects like they did in the old 60s Batman, but maybe that would have been a little bit too much over the top.
Ding, 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 ding.
What a weird choice. I think it was a good choice because he's not a big threat. He's really just sort of a hired thug with a gimmick. He is the boss of these guys or whatever, but it was kind of on the silly side. I feel sort of neutral about it. It's like, I guess that's the right choice for what they were doing with the story, and is kind of a neat little Easter egg for people that are familiar with the character. Yeah, weird choice, but right at the same time.
Good work, boss.
Now, the thing that the episode really did well, which is exactly what I was asking for, is they kept it simple. It's Batman versus the mob. Really, it's more so the cops versus the mob. Batman's not in it much. I'll talk about that later. So many stories now, especially in movies, the stories and the threat just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not enough that we're trying to save all of humanity. Now we're saving the entire space-time continuum, and now we're into the multiverse, and this, and I think that's what people are talking about when they talk about superhero fatigue, is it's just like, what threat can't superheroes stop? Now it's just, what's the biggest, flashiest explosions and bang and zoom, and it's just too much. And I think the solution isn't to go bigger, but to go smaller and go simplify this.
And you wonder why I don't believe in the system.
This story does not affect Metropolis, does not affect Central City, doesn't even affect beyond the borders of the city. We think the police commissioner with a hit out on him turns out to be less than that, turns out to be a lawyer that this guy had a beef against. Nice, small, contained, I can get my arms around it, I can understand all the aspects, I know what needs to happen. It feels better watching a story like this. And again, we bring in this villain, Onomatopoeia, who's not a big threat. He doesn't have any superpowers. I mean, I guess he's a good shot, and he says onomatopoeia words. Bang! But other than that, he's just a mobster with a gimmick. He has a mask pulled over his face, right? I kind of like that. I kind of like the simplicity of the story, even in contrast to the last episode with The Gentleman Ghost, where you start dealing in the supernatural and spells and mystics and all that. This story could happen, and I kind of like that.
Good enough.
At the same time, I do think that what makes Batman Batman is the villains, the rogues gallery, the showcase of weirdos who is up against Batman. Batman's a cool character. My favorite superhero of all time. Grew up watching Batman, love Batman, won't say a bad word about Batman.
All right.
But what comes with Batman, because he doesn't have any powers, he's just rich, he's just well-skilled, he's a guy in a costume.
Slow down a sec.
Won't say a bad word about Batman.
What comes with him is the villains. I would argue if you didn't have the villains, you wouldn't have Batman.
Can you believe him?
And I would say most of you, I could be wrong, let me know in the comments, but most of you like Batman because of the villains, or at least some degree of that. Because everybody has a different favorite Batman villain.
Okay, fine.
And I think the fact that Batman has to shift and change to fight different villains is where his superpower is. And so that's really fun. That becomes very clear in an episode like this where we go, we don't really have a villain.
Really? You want to start that again?
Onomatopoeia, I don't really call him certainly not a rogues gallery, quite the caliber of villains that we usually have.
I'm just saying.
But when you don't have a villain in there, a Joker, a Riddler, a Mr. Freeze, a Clayface, it does feel a little empty.
We're in the boonies out here.
I like that this is what I asked for, Batman and the Mob. But at the same time, I can very much see why they don't do stories like that all the time when you go, you don't have a strong villain. And for that reason, Batman's not in the episode much.
What the hell?
He sort of figures it out pretty quick, not much of a mystery, that it's Barbara they're after and not Commissioner Gordon. And then he's working to get to them. And so he's off on his own quest while they're hunkered down in this safe house, which I love that it's a model home. That's just such a clever idea. And who can you trust? Like, that's the interesting stuff. Batman isn't in there. In fact, when he does finally meet up with them, all he does is take down Onomatopoeia. Again, not a big threat. The guy's good with a gun, but no match for Batman.
That's enough.
And that's really the purpose Batman serves. So you could take Batman out of this, maybe you take Onomatopoeia out of it with it, and you still have this story standing on its own. So this very much didn't need Batman.
That's a little one-sided.
It's exactly what I asked for. And then when I got it, I went, well, it played out exactly how it should have, and it's not really a Batman show. It's not or a Batman episode.
Okay, sure.
But it's fun. It's really pretty fun. And like I said, once I got used to it and I watched it back for the second time, I liked it a lot more. And I kind of was able to ease into that and go, okay, this is dialogue driven. And I was listening more to the dialogue and not just waiting for the next scene, but going, oh, let me sit with this. And the dialogue's really cleverly written. And that surprise at the end that they weren't after Gordon, they were after Barbara, was great. And you see how they did that, where there's a lot of people we see in the episode that know they're after Gordon, Barbara Gordon, but they just say Gordon.
There's a hit out on Gordon.
Very clever in that sense. That was a great surprise. That was a great twist. That worked out very well. But at the same time, I go, well, if you take the crazy villains out of Gotham or out of the story, you don't need Batman.
You're being naive.
I mean, maybe he's just helping the police, but he certainly was in the episode, but his appearance wasn't justified, which is crazy to say about Batman. So weird. I got what I wanted, and I don't know if it's what I wanted.
Damn it.
I've been biting my tongue on this for a while and wasn't sure how to say this. And I know this isn't fair to say, but I don't like his voice.
Pow.
Hamish Linklater, who speaks for him, I like as an actor. I've seen him in a lot of different stuff. He's one of those actors that pops up here and there. I don't know if I ever really knew his name. When I'd see him, I was like, oh, he's cool, he's fun, he's good. And I think he does well as Bruce Wayne. But the voice that he uses for Batman, again, I don't mean to make comparisons. It's just sort of hard to do, especially in this aspect.
We're doing this again?
Kevin Conroy was one of the first ones that really altered his voice very distinctively. He put on an act as Bruce Wayne. That feels like more of the altered voice. Then you have that weighted, darker, gravelly sounding voice to Batman.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
And I feel like that was sort of forced or flipped in this one. Bruce Wayne's pretty good. I like that sound.
I appreciate that.
When he's Batman, I feel like I'm being so critical. It feels so forced to talk in a darker voice. It gives hints of the first Batman Begins, Christian Bale.
Swear to me!
But it feels so forced to make his voice so deep that it feels phony, and there feels like no inflection in the voice. We lose all the dynamics in the voice, and it just feels like a monotone, deep, gravelly voice.
Tell me everything. Now.
I keep listening to it, and I keep wanting to like it, and I keep trying not to compare it to Kevin Conroy. I just can't get over it.
How stubborn can one man be?
And every time it comes up, I'm like, it feels like a kid doing a Batman impression.
Stop.
So, and then we really lean into the noir vibe at the end with the saxophone playing. And I do like that they sort of wrap this all up very nicely with Barbara trying to see the good in people, and somebody that she got a better sentence for is the one that put the hit out on her. And she thought she was doing well, and her really questioning, like, oh, are people just bad, or is there good still in people? And I love that theme, and that's certainly, again, a very film noir sort of theme of going, where's the gray area of dark and light? And
I just made some mistakes.
this isn't the only time that we've seen sort of those questions of good and evil, and certainly not the first time we've seen really Batman versus the mob. I think back to the episode Appointment in Crime Alley from the original Batman the Animated Series. No gimmicky villain in this at all. It's literally just two mobsters versus each other, but then we tell this story of like, oh, is a mobster just bad, or is there some good, or is there a way to get out of that sort of life? But if you want to see my review for that, click the link on the screen and enjoy that episode until I see you in the next one.